Let's start that. Okay,
So can I ask a question?
sure.
You know how she was talking about, like the egos and everything like that. So gender, I have noticed it's hard. It feels like it may not be, but it feels like sometimes it's harder for me to get taken seriously or to stand out in a male dominated atmosphere. So how would I go about being
Well,
noticed or being taken seriously?
I agree with you. And when I work in a team and there is if you want to say, a proactive woman that's a member of the team, then if she comes across to others maybe as aggressive. That's never been my take, because I think that you're right. Women have to almost be more loud or
Dominant.
more involved to get taken serious or have their input. We do this exercise in this class, face to face, where you're stranded in the desert, your plane crashed. And so it's the actual members of the class that are in this exercise that's crash. So I divide them up into like teams of 5. One team I make all female. One team I make all male, and then the mix for the rest of the team. I could have 3 or 4 teams that have a mix of ladies and guys. And every time, bar none, every time, the team of women are the survivors. Unless they can really get there, and I see them arguing until they're blue in the face with the guys that no, if we do this, we're dead. And you got the macho guys that says, well, I'll just carry you over my back to out of the desert, So the guys always die a cruel death, because they're all Rambos and wannabes. But the team dynamics that I watch all the time is the ones that have, if there's 3 women and 2 guys, they have a good chance of surviving, because the 3 women will kind of feed off each other's energy, and the guys are like, okay, I'll listen. And then they'll just say, well, let's just take a damn vote. And then the 3 women vote that they don't do stupid, and they live. So if it's the other way, where there's 3 guys and 2 women, it's almost always a death trap, because the 3 guys are like, look, it's us 5 actually, and I think that us 2 could help carry you if you got to. The function of the exercise is, if you leave the site of the accident, you will die. You can't make it 70 miles in the desert with a gallon of water. And so you have to go into a different mode of, we're staying by the crash site because it's a huge burn mark here. It's a signal. And we got all the resources to try to keep us from sweating and losing the fluid we do have, because there's no more water after you got the gallon. Everybody gets like a cord almost. When that gallon of water is gone, there's no more water. And so they're like, yeah, we can make it 70 miles on a quart of water each. It's like 3 days walk. And the expert comes on and says, okay, if you stayed with the crash, you got a chance. If you walked out, you're dead. You're out of the game. And so right away, half the teams are already out of the money when it comes to who's going to have the best survival rate. And so they give you like 15 items, and they want you to prioritize which is the most important. And the people walking out pick a different 15 in a different order. Like, well, I need that so I can figure out where I'm going, compass, all this stuff. The ones that are staying there, no, I don't need that. I need shade, and I need some way to keep the sun off of me. I need sunglasses, So it's a whole different ordering system. And so I've recorded those sessions to use in this particular chapter about team building, just to show how sometimes gender becomes when it's a life and death thing and you're not listening, that gender plays against you if you're a woman. And it really plays against the guys by not listening to the women. I mean, if you look at I don't want to stereotype, but most women are more interested in other people's well-being than men are. It's nurturing.
That's because we're emotional creatures. We're
Yeah.
all emotional
But,
though.
but you
We're
tend
all-
to think
Because
of
we
other
house
people's
the
needs.
babies. That's why.
Well, there's
Okay, I'll
that.
give you that one.
But
I
if you
will
need
say on a
some-
man's behalf, though, I've come across where she says that she's got issues with men. I'm the other way, and I don't know if it's because I'm 6'1", but I've always had issues with other women and drama in the workplace. And I'm not for sure if it's because I've always been that leading type, but I don't have issues with men. It's with other women.
Now, on a
They
social
probably
standing,
just take you aggressively, or you might be a problem in their eyes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You might be more a little bit. They might see you as dominant.
Yeah,
A little more. You know.
I
what I'm
think
saying?
that's probably what it is.
But
Well,
Mr. Yancey, can I say something to Kate?
Yeah.
Kate, one thing I do want to tell you, if you ever get into that predicament to where you're the only female in a male, a dominant area, just go hard, sweetie. Don't get off a track. Don't worry about them. At the end of the day, you go hard for what needs to be getting done right then and there, because they're not doing it. They're too busy and not trying to work together and take you serious as a human being. They shouldn't see you as a female or a male. They shouldn't see that regardless. But when
but how are you supposed to accomplish teaming if the majority of the team
and what
won't
I
take you
studied,
serious?
it sounds like you need to go above their head and bring in a third party.
Well, and a lot of times it's like you might be asking it in a different way, is how do I get my power? And there's different ways that we can get our power in leadership and teamwork and all different methods. There's like expert power is you are the best at whatever task is that you're assigned. You're the best at it. And so people look to you and say, hey, can you help me be as good as you are? So that's a power that you can establish by setting the example and by always, and women have to go above average. They have to, or they're sunk. But I see a lot of women that have expert power. And then there's a reverence power. And sometimes you get this when you get older, or when you've been there the longest, and people hear the legend of how you solved this problem, or you took care of this employee, or you fixed an issue. And so they come to you saying, hey, you've got the experience and you got the organizational history going on here. How would I do this? So you've got this reference power. There's like 6 different powers that you can establish. And if you can kind of just find your niche, that is where you really do shine. People, it's like they quieten down when you say something. And so some people are few words, they don't say a lot, and they get swallowed up with everybody that's louder. But if there's certain circles that I'm in, and a woman says something that I know has done this before, and they've been recognized for their achievements in that field, everybody is quiet when that person's giving their input on. And so you can establish these different types of strengths by what you're doing now, which is getting certifications and studying outside your field to see how teamwork plays with success of an organization. And I mean, there's organizational development, there's OD courses that it's all about how we get along with each other and how to deal with problematic employees and how to implement change. People all react to change differently. And so if things were fine and you were like used to doing something, people seem to be in their comfort zone there. And so if we say, all right, now we're going to just add this one extra step, they start coming unglued and they don't know how to handle it because, wait a minute, we always did it this way and it worked fine. Why are you making us doing this next extra step? And unless you're a good change agent, which is what supervisors and managers are, they're change agents. Unless you're a good change agent and you can explain to them the buy-in, we talked about this last week, where you include them in the decision and you tell them the benefit of making this change. And they can see that, okay, might be a pain for a little bit, but it's going to get me home for weekends. I'm going to be able to leave here without having to do the extra cleanup or extra security or extra whatever. If it's something they see as a benefit to them too, then you get more buy-in. Sometimes it's just bad news and nobody likes what has to be done. Then they have to have this trust that we talked about, that you're looking out for their best interest. But that it is, seriously, I've observed that this lady's done extensive studies she can probably tell you about. But from where I started in the military in 1977, when the women had their own separate service and they combined into the male and female services for the Army, Air Force, Navy, all became one service. They used to have wax and waves and walls and all this different for just women. I entered service just as that was happening, where women, we became co-ed, and it opened a lot of opportunities up for me, because people who couldn't adapt to that change, to having women in the organizations, they left the service. And so there was a whole top of level leadership that wasn't there anymore. They just walked off the job.
Wow.
They just quit, which was good, because they would have been an issue, a problem
Later
with
on
them
down the
people
road.
adapting
Yeah.
to a new reality.
Right.
So I got to see, like you're talking about, they came in a little timid, a little cautious, a little bit like, well, how does this work? You know, and to the point where probably mid-career, it took 10 years, you know, and that's a lifetime in some people, their careers. But in 10 years, these women were running the place. So, I mean, it happened that quick that they transitioned from, you know, trying to figure out what their role was in the team, until their expertise, they became experts in their different fields. And they're just examples, and how they took care of their soldiers better than their counterparts, the men, were doing. They knew anniversaries, birthdays, what sports kids were in, all kinds of important human dynamics that would tell them, is this person, are they all here and ready to go to work today? So I think it's the Air Force now that's going to have its first senior person is thank you. You want me to sign anything?
I'll come back.
Okay. But I think the Air Force this year is getting its first top officer is a female. But in previous
Army.
years, the second and third leaders in all the services have been female. So yeah, the military is a more controlled environment where they can dictate, you will abide by equality and all this. But now it's that way. I mean, now we're getting more into the dynamics in the open society, where that's a proven thing too. I know in this field I'm in education, it's 65% female dominated. And so when you look at presidents of colleges and chancellors, just for Ivy Tech, it's 70-some% or higher that are female in Ivy Tech. And it's that same way in universities across the US. This is one field that the women have really thrived in. And so maybe they're not 70% of a construction crew foreman. Maybe there's some things that women aren't interested in, but any woman that wanted to be a construction crew foreman could be. There's nothing that's but air and opportunity there.
Yep.
So I wanted to pull up just a couple things in our, just to make sure I didn't miss something in our text for the different types of teams that they talk about, because that is testable, and I want to make sure you folks see that. So let me pull up our text to that particular section. And this is important, the problem solving. If you have that skill, that one skill that says, look, I know how to solve problems, you will never go hungry. You can write your own ticket as far as where you want to be and how much you want to make, if you can solve problems. And so in this chapter, it basically defines the steps. And the first one is defining the problem. We talked about this in earlier sessions about students that were late. And I let everybody in the class say, what do you think the problem is? Well, they don't know how to leave from home on time. They got transportation problems. They went through this litany of excuses they thought were the issue. When we actually got down into removing all of the smoke screens and got down to what is the most common thing here, the root cause, we found out that there wasn't enough parking spaces. You know, we did the study to find out how many spaces were available that day during that time. And we were about 400 parking spaces shy of every student finding a spot to go to class. And so when you analyze the problem, you're actually looking at, okay, is this something that is temporary? Is this something that's seasonal? Is this something that's reoccurring, or is there another deeper problem? So when you analyze it, if somebody said they just had transportation issues, well, we could get them free bus passes. We could get them shuttle, or we could get them gift cards so they could take different types of cars to come to work. But that wasn't what it was. It was just there was nowhere to park. And so once we analyze it, we really have to gather some data, like interview people and find out what's the source of the issue. Then you can start looking at, okay, what kind of suggestions do you have for a solution? I remember one of my first high-paying contracts I got was to go into this warehouse where there was this problem with hourly and mid-level management having inappropriate relationships on the job site, if you know what I mean. They caught them in changing rooms and warm-up spots, and it was a bad situation. And so the people had to be reiterated that, look, if you have somebody that you're in charge of, you can't have a relationship with them. That's a conflict of interest. And then you're actually using your position of, I can hire or fire you, to get favors from that person. And so that's illegal, and that won't be tolerated. So we had to reiterate the law to them, not only that it was just morally wrong, but it was against labor statutes, that if somebody's a direct report to you, you have say about their schedule, their pay, you can't have a relationship with them. They can't be working for you and you be involved with them. And so once we got the rules out to the game, then there was immediately a different tempo about, people were avoiding that kind of stuff. And the Owler folks were told, look, if you feel like you're being pressured into doing something that you don't feel comfortable with, or if someone that you work for you feel is making inappropriate advances, here's the anonymous place that you can register your concerns. And so we generated all these alternatives so we could try to figure out how to stop this and to have a way to defuse it from going any further. And then there's the step 4 is once we come up with the best solution, where we had this 800 number, and you didn't have to leave your name, or you just said, look, on the 3rd shift, there's a supervisor who's harassing a forklift operator into going on a date. I saw it, and you could tell that the person was uncomfortable. So then we test the solution. So we, started using this 800 number on one of the shifts. The one that was the most prevalent was the 3rd shift. And so that's where we started this process. And we come up with, we evaluated what we were getting for calls, and we could see that it was almost the same people, the same supervisors that were involved in this, that they really did have some type of a problem. That
Right.
they, even after being told that's not appropriate, they were still, pursuing it. And they were married. They were already they had a family and all this kind of stuff. So we went back to management and we said, look, we're going to have to come up with some more severe penalties if people keep doing this, like termination.
Right.
And before it was just like, we're going to write it up, put it in your file. I said, no, this person needs to be gone. So you're going to have to get a little bit more punch into this. So
How many write-ups does it take?
yeah, well, they wanted to have 3. So 3 people had to suffer that indignity before a problem could go away. I said,
Yeah.
you folks are leaving yourself open for all types of liability, creating
Right.
some stupidity like that. So anyways, the first time one came through and somebody actually gave their name, and the numbers were coming to my desk. And so I met with the person off campus. I said, look, I want you to call 2 more times because it takes 3 and I want this person gone. And you've had at least 1 or 2, 3 incidences that you could tell about. And so that's how we got rid of that person. But the problem, once we went through all of this, was the person who hired me, the general manager and the HR director, they were having an affair. And both of them were married. And so after the first supervisor walked to the door and said,
It happens everywhere.
they turned back and they said, hey, you might want to check Bob and Lucy, see what's going on with them two.
They're mad.
I'm like, what? Yeah, if it's okay for them, how am I
Is
getting
that a
locked out of here?
swingers college?
Say again?
Is that a swingers college or what?
This was in a warehouse. None of that. I don't see that really happening here.
Okay, all right.
I mean, we got 30 witnesses in a classroom. If a professor acts inappropriate, it's pretty well over that day.
Right.
So I really don't see. I mean, I'm not blind. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. We could have some very young adjuncts, attractive ladies or gentlemen that maybe date adult students, but they're not allowed to while they're in their class. So if after the semester or something that they said, hey, you want to have coffee or something, that's okay, but not while you have a grade that you're holding over that person. That's inappropriate. So that's against the rules here. So when you implement this best solution to your problem solving, does it really solve the issue? I mean, it took firing that GM and that HR director to fix that site. Once everybody saw those 2 people walk to the door, they go, oh crap, they're serious. And so it was no longer an issue. And then that story, because this is a multi-site business, it's an international business, that story got published across the newsletter and it got through the grapevine before you could ever put it in any kind of print or anything. They're like, oh crap, they are not playing. They went down and just wiped out the leadership in this. So the entire organization kind of like took notice and like, you know what, even though that morally was wrong and they knew it, now it's like, oh, wait a minute, that affects my paycheck. I best take it serious. And that's the only way in some cases you can get change is you go straight to the wallet. And that really does get their attention. But then we come back because there's another step here after implementing the best solution is follow-up. You got to come back 30, 60, 90 days. They asked me to come back every year and say, are we still on track on a lot of things that I've started with them? So you got follow-up to see did that really solve the problem or did it create a new one? Or did they just hide it better? Or what's been the effect on morale and on production and on our bottom line, on safety and all this? So they have a lot of different metrics that they could put into play to find out if that did solve the problem. And so a lot of times it might just have hit the problem and got it noticed, but it didn't really resolve it. And so they have to come back and reevaluate what's the next step that we need to take. Just like I was talking about, having them written up did not solve the problem. Having them escorted to the door, that didn't solve the problem. Having the GM and the HR director, that solved the problem. So you have to keep coming back and say, well, is things different now? Are we moving in the right direction or where are we on that? So if you can do problem solving, there is definitely industry-wide opportunity for you there. Yes, sir. I just use my finger. I screwed up. We got a supply chain expert here with us right now.
Is it FedEx, UPS?
Is it
our
your boss?
version of that, except this guy runs the whole program. He's got.
Hey, I was right. I said, is it your boss?
Yeah, could be. Thank you, sir. So I just wanted to hit on those being very important issues about problem solving. This conflict resolution, we have an entire course that you can take on that. And there's sort of a, what's a win-win or a win-lose? Like you got to figure out how does each person come to the table and give something. And so there is, most of the time, it's just a miscommunication. I mean, there's really, from a day-to-day basis, you're used to operating in a certain, this is how we do things. Seldom is there something that's so out of place that somebody comes up and says, wait a minute, why is this going on? It's never, you know, this is detrimental to safety or our customer or whatever. Seldom is it something like that where quality control can pick it up. Most of the time it's just, hey, that person looked at me funny, or why did that person ask me about this or that and not ask everybody else about this or that? It's normally a communication error, or it's where there's a perception. And the rule about perception is what? If you perceive it's something, then it is something. In your mind, you just perceive that, oh, those two are not being fair. Then no matter what kind of stuff they give you, saying, look, here's why we made this decision, and you know, your first perception was that was not fair. Then it wasn't fair in your mind. There's hardly anything we can do to change our people's mind when they have made a decision based on their perception of a situation. And so that we have to resolve conflicts by saying, I understand that that's your perception and this is their perception. Maybe it's somewhere in between there. Maybe what you have some good points there that I could see that being your point of view, but these other folks, they have good points too. And let's look at maybe sharing each other's, the best parts of the point of view that you have there, but trying to de-escalate that where people can actually talk without frothing at the mouth and getting all bent out of shape. That takes some talent. And when I had to deliver bad news one time, I actually had, they called them the three grannies. There were these three ladies and they were in their, I guess, mid 50s, but they dressed like, I mean, they overdid it with the older hairdo and the older dresses and no makeup and glasses and all that. They look 80. I mean, that's women who wanted to look older. I seldom do I've ever met you, but they were human relations HR experts. And these three ladies would come to, you could hire them. They would come to these situations where there was conflicts. They'd show up about 5 in the morning and start baking cookies. They brought all the stuff to make cookies. And when the, you know, like say it was an issue about voting a union in, or there was an issue about layoffs or something that was bad news for somebody was going to not be happy. They'd hire these women and they come in and the whole place smelled like, you know, chocolate chip cookies. And here's these ladies handing out cookies and saying, how are you, honey? And all this kind of stuff, like their grandma would talk to them, you know, patting them on the shoulder and stuff. And it just changed the vibe. It changed it was this hostility, you could cut it with a chainsaw. When these people were coming in, it's like, I am going to raise hell. I'm not leaving here unless I get something done my way. You could hear them in the background, like, give us Barabbas, you know, and all this kind of stuff. These old ladies, well, they're younger than I am now. Their perception that the people had was this was like my grandma. And how can I cuss or scream or holler or raise all this hell around my grandma? They changed the whole vibe where people were actually listening. And they come up there and say, now, we want to make sure that everybody leaves here happy and that everybody leaves here knowing they have a job. And, you know, they would give all these reassuring information, and it may not be as good a job as they had before that meeting, or it may not be as high a pay as that, but they felt there left thinking like, you know, it could have been worse, or maybe I can deal with it like it is, or maybe I just need to move on. But they didn't get hostile. They didn't cut anybody's tires or anything. So that conflict resolution, those three ladies make a job out of that. And they are high paid. I mean, I think they were getting $5,000 each for like an hour's work. So it's big bucks if you can learn these skills. So I think the last area that we wanted to look at here was misconduct. Is that what we're talking about here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Typical requirements for good conduct. And what I found out is there's no such thing as common sense. If it was common, why is it so hard to find it? It's not really common. And so what you use is reasoning and saying, well, I was raised to think this or that. And maybe your parents or your grandparents or your siblings or somebody had some ingraining kind of value system as to what was right or wrong. And those are as different as all the colors of the rainbow. There is different ideas about what is right. There's legal and illegal, but right and wrong is a big gray factor. So if we look at when you go to a place to work, they spell it out and they say, these are the things that will get you terminated. And they list them. Like if you do this, you sleep on the job, you strike somebody, you get physically violent with somebody, you bring a weapon, you know, they have the list of stuff that if you violate that, you are a goner. But there's some stuff on here that might be a case by case type situation. Violating substance abuse policy, including drinking, drunkenness at work. Well, now we've got states that recreational marijuana is fine. And there's certain unions that have blocked the employer's ability to do random drug testing. And so you can have folks out there backing a truck into a building. We don't know what their mental state is, how they react to drugs, but they could have had some drugs that day. And you got people with forklifts that are raising stuff up 40 feet who may have had a bad day the day before and they decided they would have some recreational time and
Right.
they're still having under the effects of that. So
Mr. Yancey, ain't it on certain companies that they can infect their own rules? Like if you do smoke marijuana or recreational marijuana,
Still drug test.
we do not want you, period. Right? So I'm just trying to understand if
it's a private company, then they would have their own but I can tell you that there's different places that I've went to try to help them with this one issue of drunkenness and drug use.
Right.
Because it shows up in things like absenteeism, tardy, quality of work, accidents. It shows up that is an issue there. One of the pushbacks I get when I say, well, you know, you can do a drug test right now, but you can do it for $1 a person. So just have them pee in a cup, put the little dip strip in, ta-da, we're done. And they're like, well, we don't really want to do that. I'm like, why? Why would you not want to solve your accident, your tardiness, and your call-offs? Why wouldn't you want to solve that? Because you got to look out for the other 90% of your workforce is playing dodgeball out there around these people. So I don't get it. Why wouldn't you want to do the right thing here? Well,
I think I know why.
We don't have that much of a labor force to recruit from. And these are great operators, and we pull people from other companies because they know we don't test. And so we would lose a talent pool of operators if we started testing. I go, let them go.
Right.
You will lose accidents. You will lose people who aren't showing up when their shift starts. You're going to lose customers instead of employees. So you decide which one. And I've had to just walk away saying, here, just sign the check. Thank you. I gave you the best advice I could. It's your company.
It's like they rather keep the liability.
Yeah. And some of them, it's family, you know, smaller businesses where they've got relatives that are recreationally experimenting and coming to work. and they can't really make the other employees that aren't related to them have a different standard than their relatives. I mean, some places try that, but depending on what you do, I mean, look, if you worked at a marijuana growing farm and you were processing marijuana all day and there was no heavy machinery or no sharp objects or anything, that might be the place you could sing Kumbaya 24/7. But when you're moving 6 and 8 tons of steel around other folks, and you're backing a semi that's in traffic that could crush my daughter driving, you better be on a strict standard of having your head in the right place.
Right.
I agree.
So,
But that can even go as far as, you've got to even take it as far as, hey, Roger, who just had back surgery 2 days ago, who was supposed to stay off for a week but didn't want to, so now he's at work on a forklift with 2 Vicodin in his system, you know, so it goes, there's different ends of the spectrum.
yeah, you are
The
so right.
prescription, just because it's prescribed, can make things worse too, so you got to look at the whole entire picture.
Well, prescription is the epidemic that's taken our nation. It's not marijuana. It is prescription drugs. You're right. And it usually is from a working person, male or female, whatever, getting injured and wanting to still provide for their family. So they take these muscle relaxers or painkillers and they get addicted to them.
I mean,
the ones that are really bad were made for cancer patients. And from what I understand, because I had a nephew that committed suicide over this, so it's bad news and it's close to home, that they actually can have some type of a chemical connection to the stem of your brain that can't be removed. And so once you're addicted, and it could take 30 days, 30 pills that could addict you for life, your brain never will be free from that chemical dependency. And then they move on to heroin when they can't get any more prescription drugs. They've used every doctor in driving distance. And then fentanyl is the stuff that took out my nephew.
It kills them,
They mix that with stuff to try to get you the extra bump, and it's straight poison.
Some of these kids don't even know it's fentanyl. My daughter was with Xanax, you know, so it just it's close to home as well. But what I'm saying is, it's scary being in the workforce. It's scarier with that, you know, and it's just all scary.
Yeah. I mean, now that they tried to rectify it with time release, so that, you know, if you took one that was supposed to last 12 hours, it would break down and you wouldn't get the whole thing at once. Well, they grind them up. And it breaks down all of these coatings that are supposed to make it time release. And when they went to generic, after it's been out for 5 years, then the patent wears off and they can all make it in a generic version. They never made time release generic. It was all straight. If it's 800 milligrams, or you got 800 milligrams or whatever that drug was now.
Wow.
And so that's when things started turning for the worse, is when this became generic and there wasn't a time released version of this drug that was being prescribed anymore.
Because they already had so many packed up and on the shelves to get out.
Yeah. I will say, in some businesses' defense, though, 20 years ago when I worked for, Metro Bank, I was assistant branch administrator for Metro Bank, their policy was they didn't drug test, but if you had an issue, come to them and they will pay to get you the help that you need. They will, whether it's drug rehabilitation or for drinking, because that was more for family oriented. But I don't see companies doing that these days, because I think there's so many people with so many issues.
Well, and really, you got, like a supervisor, how deep do you want to get into the psyche of this employee? Because there's a lot of violence on work sites, because say an employee bottled all this up and never told anybody they were having domestic issues or drug issues or whatever. And we're not paid psychiatrists. If we see something, we say something. And so I know for the state of Indiana, you got 222 instead of like 911, you got 211. That sends you out to the resources for all the drug, any kind of domestic violence, any kind of homelessness, food, anything that you need. If there's an agency for it, they answer through that one direct line. They can put you in touch with the people who can help. But it's a deep rabbit hole you can get into there.
Yeah.
So this chapter lists other things that you can get terminated for. And I think that the way the questions, did anybody take the chapter 8 quiz that they can refresh my memory?
Yeah, and I missed one of the questions and it ticked me off because it confused me a little bit. I thought that work misconduct, no offense, but when you put wrong information on an application, that's illegal, straight up illegal. I didn't think that that was under the work misconduct category, so
Yeah, I mean, how
I
did you
didn't
get the
check that
job?
one.
I mean, how did you get the work?
Yeah.
That one would be, damn, is it listed on here?
I'm not for
Oh.
sure. Well, but it also told you to check all that applied, and I checked 3, but not that one, so I got it wrong. But I'm just saying it's on there. It's
Oh, well, damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is in this area in education, they're hardcore when it comes to credentials. I mean, they call the college and said, I want to talk to somebody who knows this person. They want
Yeah.
a personal interaction besides a piece of
That's how
paper.
it should be.
And because we can lose our accreditation, which means we can't charge you financial aid, we can't charge you tuition if we lose our accreditation. And so we have accreditation police that actually come in and they'll pick up an employee file and they'll do that same audit. And if they come up with, why is this person teaching that when they have a degree in basket weaving? And so we have to be certified ourselves before we can teach our subjects. All right, there was, I think that was the profane language that probably get me walked to the door a few times. Cross-functional teams, those, if you can get into a situation where you're in charge at some point and your team, say, is the best at marketing, and so you can go out and you can set up something for your clients and for your customers to tell their story, and you get the opportunity to go where they actually design whatever it is that you're selling, the design team or the manufacturing team. Those folks need to have like a representative of each one of those elements on a team that says, okay, we're looking to make a better soda can insulator, a koozie. What kind of input do you have? And marketing can say, well, those are so plentiful. Why don't we go to something that'd be more marketable? And maybe the design people say, well, we already have this insulation and foam in our inventory. We could probably do it for like 2 cents a pop. And so then you got everybody telling the story about is that a good idea to do, or should we look for a better idea? Instead of making the big investment and then nobody wants to buy a crappy koozie, so having those cross-functional teams, those are what are used for these software developers and for these cutting edge technology type environments. That's how they work. Okay, so there's no video for chapter 9, but I will tell you that has anybody took the chapter 9 quiz? And everybody got 100? Good.
Yep.
You really want to look at this text when it comes to that chapter, because what you consider this thing we just had about it's hard to learn if you already know. So we're already thinking, I already know about email addresses and I already know about software, Microsoft Office, all that. So it's hard to learn something when you've kind of already wrote that off as like, yeah, I know that. But so I want to bring a couple things to your attention that I see missed the most when people take this part of the CLA. It talks a little bit about what your email, this is a simple one here. Like the email address has got this format. Let me make this bigger so you guys can see it. So we got the username, that's you. Like we're trying to set up these MSSC accounts, right? Your first initial and your last name and some number, right? And then you got @ and it's going to have the domain name. So that was Ivy Tech, right? But you could have the name of whatever company that you're working at, or whatever domain that you belong to. It could be like AT&T where you get your email stuff, or it could be Hotmail or whatever, right? So people are okay when it gets the username and domain name. The type of institution, there's a question on there that's always missed about the type of institution. And so it lists some of them on here. And it gives examples of Microsoft, Yahoo, Google Mail. So here it goes to the types of institution determines the suffix of an email address, whether it's a .com, like, .com, or if it's a .net, .net, or .org, or .gov, or in the case of Ivy Tech, .edu, right?
Mhm.
So it gives a typical address there. And the question comes at them with which one of these emails is from a state government office or something along that line. It's not exactly saying, is it .gov, but that's
Right.
what you're looking for that extension. Is it some part of government, right? And in Indiana, it's going to say in.gov, right? So if you were in Florida, it'd be fl.gov. But it's got a tricky question to ask about the suffix, where it has an email address, and it's asking you, which institution does this person belong to? And you're like, well, how would I know? Because it was the way it was asked. If you didn't know that suffix was to identify the institution that you were belong to, then you wouldn't know to look at the last three letters. So that's one that I wanted to bring you up to. Word format, you guys know that. And spreadsheets, Excel, you probably had that in 3rd, 4th grade. What I wanted to bring you up to date here on was this warehouse management system, which is a WMS. It's on the test. And it's basically, if you wanted to say it's an Excel spreadsheet, anything that comes into that warehouse is added to an inventory. And it knows exactly, like in a cell on a spreadsheet, it knows exactly what shelf and what row, what aisle that it's on. And so and they know how many are there. And so when they take one away from selecting an order, then that warehouse management system takes down that inventory by one. It also tracks things like the age. So if there's a perishable, say I got this 500 pumpkins and I got them on such and such a date and they expire in 12 days. I have to have them out of the warehouse in 12 days. It lets me know that one lot, that big box that's sitting on a pallet, that has to be used first before the new one that just came in 12 days later, before that one gets used. And so the warehouse management system will tell you, you need to rotate your oldest stock, the perishable stuff, to the front so we can get it out the door. It also does things like measure the dimensions or cube of containers, like if it's in a case or if it's in a box or if it's in a package, and it tells what the dimensions are and what the weight of it is. So then we know when we have orders that are selected, if we've got too much weight for that trailer, or if we've got too much volume. If we put too many cases of toilet paper at that door, they aren't going to fit on that truck. The weight won't be an issue, but the size of those cases of toilet paper, they will not all fit on that trailer. And so all of that information is in this warehouse management system. So the other software system that talks about is the transportation management system, which is a TMS. And it basically, anything from that door forward, when it goes on a truck, it's covered by that. And it covers routes, it covers miles, it covers weight, cost per dollar, any fees or fuel, anything that's used to make that transportation happen, permits, licensing, fines, all of that's covered under the transportation management system. And you can get a degree in just transportation at the bachelor level. And one of your classes that you're going to be taking in our program is transportation systems. And you're actually going to get a certification in transportation management. And so you're going to get to work with that software. You're going to be familiar with it. And so when you go to a employer, you're going to say, I'm familiar with this software. They're going to know what that is. And they go, okay, yeah. Then that might get you a better offer as far as management position, or you might be in charge of outbound or inbound, where you just work with the transportation part of it. I got this so big I can't see what I wanted to look at. Here's one that gets missed. Not basically this one, customer relations management. When you have a phone call with somebody or you email them, it's like if there's a script, if you want to say, that says, hi, this is so-and-so from Amazon, and we understand you have an issue with your order. It's sort of got like a go-to chart that will tell you how to answer concerns from the customer. But it also, if they've ordered something, it's telling when it left, when it's supposed to be there, what was in it, how much it cost, what the purchase order number was, or the order number of it was. But then it gives a lot more information about the customer, like what they do, how often they bought from you, when you probably expect them to buy something else from you, how they pay. Is it by cash, by month, by quarter? And then it even has some other stuff like upcoming anniversaries and birthdays. You can get some really good, if you want to call it intel, but this is how you keep track of what your customers' needs are and how to best provide for those needs is under this customer response or relations. The military, when I was working with the recruiting command, they just brought in a software for all of the recruiters to operate off of, and it was laptops. And we had to do what they call red time, and that's prospecting. So you either had to be knocking on a door, coming into a high school, or you had to be on the phone. And so this customer response team would bring up a list of, say, 20 people that you had to call and talk to. It would dial the number while you're sitting there, and the screen would come up with what you talked about and what kind of questions they had and what the next steps were when you talked to them before. If you've had any kind, or if they're just a senior going to Avon High School and they're in science and geometry and they're passing all their classes, we would have some kind of blueprint information to have a conversation about them under this customer response. And so if the person had no interest, or say they had some kind of physical disability that wouldn't allow them to go through training, then we would close out that file and, maybe just ask them, hey, do you know anybody that might be interested in the military? Whenever we talk to them in the future, it'd be to ask for referrals more so than to ask them if they'd like to join. So I saw that work out where you either loved it or you hated it. You loved it if you were organized and hey, it's 10 calls, I'll get them done in 10 minutes and then I can go about my life. You hated it if it came up and says, oh, damn, I got 10 calls. So it was a love-hate kind of a thing with that customer management. Here's the transportation system. The one that doesn't stick with the folks for some reason, we know about barcodes. The difference between a barcode and a RFID tag, what's the difference?
RFID has information about the product and the quantity and all that inside.
I think it says Pepsi to force this down. See that barcode?
Yep.
On the Pepsi can?
Yep.
That was put on there, let's see, in January. Oh, December 6th. That was put on there and printed in December 6th. So since December 6th, this barcode has said something like what the contents of this can is, what the ingredients are, who canned it, what its shelf life is, what its unit of issue, how big it is, and how it's supposed to be sold, if it's in a 12 pack or 24 pack or whatever. All of that's on there, and that never can change. So 10 years from now, that barcode has got the same information.
If RFID can be changed, yep.
If it's an RFID chip, I can say, hey, send this from Atlanta to New York. And on the way to New York, you say, no, they really need it in New Jersey. So I can change the RFID tag that's probably wrapped in the pallet with all of the cases. And it'll tell me when I go in to look at the inventory about where's all my Pepsi, that RFID chip tells exactly geographically where it's located right now. And it could have sensors connected to that chip that tell me what the temperature is, what the elevation of it is, if it's been dropped, if it's secure, if it's behind at least one other locked tag. So the big difference is the UPC is one time down and dirty, it doesn't change. Whereas if it's a RFID, that can change. It can be
And also,
updated.
so the barcode you can see, the scanner gets
That's
to go
right.
directly to the ID. You don't have
See how I
to.
had to put it to the camera? That's the only way you can scan it, is it has to be a line of sight. I have to see it. You have to have some type of either a device like those halos that were going over the moving belts, or you use a handheld to do it. If it's an RFID, it doesn't have to be in line of sight. I can get it from anywhere. I can even get it from an airplane.
Professor Merrill, if they change one piece of that, then they do have to change the UPC number. If that Pepsi or Coke, if they change one item of that process, then a new UPC has to be established for that same item.
You're right. And it's amazing how much data they've got on there already. But you have seen them. This one, I think, is a 9-line. They have some that go up to like 21 lines. And that's for more technically like a phone that has all these subcomponents and everything in it. Each one of those will be represented as to what kind of processor, what kind of chip set, what kind of memory, all that kind of stuff. So they can get more data in there. But this RFID, they even have these chips now that are so small that within a warehouse, you can have 5 million of them. And those are embedded in like your phone. Right now, your phone, when it was manufactured, they put a chip by one of the processors to let them know how many they had in inventory, where they were and all that. Until you crush that phone, they'll be able to find that processor. No matter what you turn off on your phone, no matter if it's got a battery in it or whatever, that chip that's connected to a part within your phone, and there's several, there's probably 30 or 40 of those, will let us know geographically where that is within 3 feet the entire time that it's not crushed. And so there's some privacy issues with that. There's some people saying, wait a minute, I want a clean phone where nobody can track it. It was used in the supply chain is why it was tagged, so they could keep track of high value, high pilfered technology. But the aftermarket, after it's served its purpose in the supply chain, and now it is part of a larger component, it does tend to get deactivated, but law enforcement and different agencies want the ability to reactivate those. I mean, it does cost them money to monitor those, so they don't want to spend the money on, I sold them 10 million processors, why do I give a rat's butt where they're at right now? They don't have any marketable reason to want to know that. So that's something that's being worked out in the legal arena. Okay, magnetic stripes, we see that on our ID cards and your credit cards. That strip that's on the back that can have your driving record or your whole credit history. It's crazy what kind of information goes on that, but that's usually what we use for ID to come into a place, or to do banking, or to show or identify who we are. This is the one that people haven't heard of and they missed. Optical systems. And this is a question on the test. OCR, which is optical character recognition. And it's used by the US Post Office, and it scans handwritten zip codes or handwritten addresses, and it translated it into a barcode. And so if you've ever got a letter from your grandma or your mom or somebody, and there's the address written out, happy birthday, all this stuff, and at the bottom there's a sticker with a barcode on it, it went through OCR so they could digitize what the zip code was. It might have been illegible any other way. But this is the same thing that happens when you send a fax. So I know that's old technology, but some people actually still, and it's the same thing for scanning, for copying and whatever. But you have a optical reader like a camera that can actually see text, and it digitizes that image, and then it re-images it at the other end, the distant party, that the other fax machine. and makes that same copy of what you sent through your fax machine. Nowadays, you just attach a digital file and you can open that same type of document instead of having it scanned and everything. But if you had a handwritten contract with a signature on it and that had to be validated, you could actually scan that in, and this optical character recognition would figure out what was a 1 and an M and a G and all this, and they would give a digital file that would represent whatever that was. I think the way the question reads is, what type of software is used by the post office to recognize zip codes? Something like that. It's something obscure, and you can put down Word or Excel and it would be right. I mean, they use that too, right? But OCR is what they're looking for. And if you haven't heard that term, optical character recognition, except in this class, that's why I wanted to bring that point to you, is it's on the test.
I've never heard of it.
It is on the test. Okay, so we covered those softwares. At the end of this, let me make this smaller. At the end of the text, it's got the glossary. And like I say, there's less than 50 terms in here. And I think it comes out to like 4 or 5 pages. Let me see, three pages. This is the best short study period that you could do, is to look at those 3 pages and just say, okay, I know what an accident is. I know what an audit is. Automated guided vehicle system. Wait a minute. Let me see what the term is, what it means here. Go through this, review it. Like I say, there's 50 terms or less. That's going to add at least 3 or 4 correct answers to your test, because you've seen this recently. And this is stuff that's in the first chapter that we haven't seen in 4 weeks, second chapter. So this is a good review tool when it comes to the terms to do well when you take the exam. CTAP, that's on there, 2 or 3 different ways they ask that question. What is the Container Security Initiative? When you look at this, just take the time to look at these different terms. It's well worth spending an hour looking at 50 different terms to be ready for it. And for the most part, you know what recycle is, you know what SOP is, work teams. There's not going to be that many terms that you aren't familiar with. So this is just to reacquaint you with the stuff that you've been exposed to in this particular chapter. So I'm going to stop our recording and we'll have some conversation here.